out here collaborating.
There'll be other worlds. Yeah.
It's just POV. But we can't do it yet.
If I'm typing, is that going to bother your sound? Is that okay?
No, it should be fine.
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing. To be honest.
Like right here.
That's fine.
All right, about ready? Cool. All right. Welcome to Afternoon Night of Guests. We have some special guests today. This is Zephyr. He's 10 months old. He will not be in your worlds. Don't worry. So guests for now, Sabrina, my wife, Rob, friend of the ETC. And we'll have our next guest is coming down shortly. But before we get started, let's go ahead and do a quick attendance.
Team 16. Where's number 5? Sorry, who is it? Who is it, though? You. Okay, cool. 18. Team 18. Okay. Team 20. Wait, who's missing? Okay, team 22. All right, team 24. And then they're in there. All right, team 26. Okay, and team 28. All right, cool.
All right. I feel like we've got some setup happening here. So there's clearly one world that's going first. But the way we're going to be doing this is we'll be welcoming a guest into the world. You will be wishing them luck. So we're going to work on getting things set up so we know what's going on in terms of like making sure the text's working. We're going to wish the guest luck. And we're going to sit back and watch. And afterwards, we'll talk. You will, before your world starts, hand me your predictions. And so when we're done, we'll go over the predictions. We'll talk about the experience, how the guests understood what was going on, all those little things so we can have just a debrief. And we'll talk a little bit about feeling of freedom. As always, taking notes as producers. It's going to be hard to see it at the moment, but we have the feedback form as well. So thinking about what might you iterate, all those fun little things. But with that, are we about ready to start?
Sort of, kind of, yes.
All right, sort of, kind of, yes.
Yeah. Who is our night guest?
I think Sabrina will be going first.
Sabrina. Thomas. Y'all ready? Yeah. Hi. Welcome to this podcast. This is your naive guest. We're trying to hear the question. I think that's the sign we're supposed to make.
If we get audio for guests, we can watch audio and watch video.
Help Sabrina in. Hold it for a while.
All right, we going?
Should I go? Yeah. All right.
All right, let's do it. You can see it. Watch the very top of the screen.
Oh no.
All right. That's it. All right. Third down.
You go to video?
Grab these two. Already start. Yeah. Holy shit.
you want to? So you had a little more to the setup too. Do you want to talk through what else we would have seen?
Yes. So that flashlight inside the environment is supposed to light up the world. So you would have been able to see the actual world with the flashlight. And inside the cell is our producer, Steve Gehrig, who would have been sitting in there. And at the very end, he would come out of the cell because it's opened, and he would surprise the guests with something that we were not able to reveal in that video.
All right. Well, let's talk through the predictions as well. All right, Sabrina, your guess. You were in there, and so the beginning of this world, and you got a chance to sort of feel the beginning very briefly.
Yes.
Right. So prediction 1: guests will see the star and shoot their flashlight onto it. They will match the shadow. I'm kind of curious, you watching the video, and you sort of feeling that beginning.
I didn't have time to play with the star enough. I tried to pick it up. I had a flashlight in one hand and a hand in the other hand that pinched. So I thought maybe I was supposed to pick up that as like a stanchion and carry it. But I didn't get a lot of time with it, so I might have realized the shadow was important if I had longer.
Well, and I'm curious from playtesting, what was the behavior you saw with guests for that opening moment?
Sometimes folks would try to pick up the star, but the other objects you can pick up, but the star we specifically made so you can't. We put it on a post.
Yeah.
So that you would have to realize the shadows before you could enter the rest of the room, and then you could pick stuff up.
So in that, I guess, kind of describe in playtest what was the general behavior for that opening moment? What would you see?
Generally, people would try to pick it up at first, realize they couldn't, and then start just pointing the flashlight at it because that was their only other option.
Okay. Number 2, guests will discover they can grab objects with their left hand and the trigger, which I'm guessing is we get into now the space of like we move objects and the flashlight.
Yes, because then you're in the space where all the objects are on the table, and it's just not possible based on their like alignment sitting on the table to match up the shadows.
And I'm watching it, like there's a sort of a fascinating progression of complexity, like just seeing the objects and the twisting of the objects to get them to line up. Like I think the O was an object that was a little pretty closely aligned with an O, but the P was a twist of metal that if you look at it, the object, it's not a P. So I'm also curious for the playtesting, what did it look like with guests doing that? And I'm also curious, did you change things as you built this based on playtesting for that interaction point?
Yeah, so there was a few of the objects that were too symmetrical at first, and so there were actually multiple orientations of the object that should have worked, would look like they worked to the guest, and then we had to change the objects to make them asymmetrical. And even some of those weren't clear, so we had to iterate on those. Like the scale, we had to add weights to the sides of the scale to be different to make it more obvious that it wasn't, the E was just one particular way.
Did guests, so I guess in general, guests understood the shadow matching idea from the beginning?
Sometimes they would try to put the objects in the symbols on the wall. And sometimes that would work because the shadow would match up immediately. So we had to play with the distances and how big the symbols were on the wall to indicate that like the object was not the same size as the thing it was filling.
And then the last prediction is the guests will see the prisoner in the cell and free them. Now, when you say free them for this prediction, is that complete all the 4 shadows, or is there something else we need to do?
Completing all 4 shadows, yes.
Okay. Did you see in your playtests guests connecting the last shadow to opening the cell and freeing the prisoner?
Well, the shapes of all the letters spell open,
Yeah.
and some people would notice that before they even realized what they were supposed to do, they saw what it said, and they connected that with the prisoner.
I guess, and then maybe the inverse. Did you see people opening the cell because they were just completing the sequence and not really connecting that the prisoner was sort of their real goal?
In the beginning, we had that, but we sort of originally it didn't spell open, it was just kind of arbitrary. So we played on that to make it more obvious. And we played with the animations of the cell to make it easier to see. Yes.
Yeah, so at first we have a little feedback for the cells open. So a lot of players didn't notice that the cell is already open.
Yeah.
So we add some virtual effect, add some animations to the cell, and also make some sound for the cell open. And then player notice it. And also at this time, our actor would just walk out from cell and say, no, that something happened.
Because one, just like to back up on the whole world, it's really lovely. Like it looks like the shadow effect. It's a hard effect to get to work, and it looks like it's working really well. Now, it's sort of a question of like interacting with it, but you have a level of control that feels like where it needs to be for this world to be effective. And I really love the build, like the idea of having the first moment be really constrained and expanding. And the thing that I really liked was the reveal of open. Like you have a world that's very mysterious. And mystery means that the guest is wondering, like what is next. And you're walking this line between the guest having confidence, the guest knowing my goal is this, and more the guest sort of like taking steps, like next step, next step, next step. And like, yes, Zephyr. And the reveal of like the first letter is not obviously a letter, but the next letter is like, oh wait, that's a P, and there's like the brain starts working. So I really liked how you sort of guided the thought process, and that's why I was sort of wondering about the prisoner, because what feels the next level of this is, does the guest understand what they're here to do? And so like you welcome them in, they're like connecting the shadows and unlocking things, but I guess I'm sort of wonder who is the prisoner? Do we have any sense of that, like, in who we are? Is there a story here?
Do you want to go into that?
So we actually have an opening animation to sort of introduce the background story of the game, but it's not in the video. It's not included in the video, but if you play the game, it's there. I'm not sure why the animation is not in the playtest. Oh, okay. So
Well, I guess what is the backstory here?
yeah, it's so the naive player is supposed to be a detective, and he is dispatched to a old lab and try to rescue a mysterious man. So you are not supposed to know the identity of the man trapped in the cell until the last minute you save him, and you sort of figure it when during the performance of Steve, but Steve is not in the pass through is not in the video, so you cannot see the performance of Steve, so you cannot know the.
So we have a design that you really don't know the identity of the actor. It's just that when you solve all the puzzles and our actor step out of the cell approaching you and your flashlight turns off, you will have a kind of fearing, and then it all turns dark. But when you just turn off your headset, we'll give an apple to you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little surprise. Yeah, but what we want to create is someone you don't really know. You don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's for where I'm building, like you've got a really good sense of like what is happening next, and it feels like the prisoner moment is not the end. It's like there's another question that comes from that.
We had some feedback in playtesting initially that the prisoner would pull out a dagger at the end, and people were like, but I was helping them, I'm a little confused. So we changed it to them presenting you with a gift. So even though it was spooky and you have this feeling of something ominous, it ends up being
Yeah,
okay.
and I think that if I were like, because the world is really lovely. I mean, I think you've got a great aesthetic. I love the shadow mechanic, the complexity of the shadows, the idea of twisting. It feels like you've got the right build to guide the guest through that, and there's no instruction. It's all about feedback. Like you've got the feedback on the letters forming is super solid. Like it's watching it. I absolutely believe that when the guest gets that, like it's the cause and effect will click really well. And so all of that builds, and it makes me want like this to have a reveal and have an ending. I want to try it. So it's obviously you're pushing on some technology that's making it a little harder to deliver it, but I really love the ambition. I love the design you put into this. So it's really, really solid. I just want to I want to feel it all the way through. So anyway, great work.
Thank you.
Team 26.
All right, perfect. We're gonna have to do some resetting just after that. We need like a big yeah. We'll tell them first.
Hey, Mike. Yeah.
But there's one round
Okay. As long as they know that. Okay.
Do you want them that last one possibly set up their experience in the world, like in the hardware room upstairs, so that they can you can do it afterwards?
Yeah, we can try.
Yeah.
All right, which team is this, by the way? 26. 26. All right.
Long time ago, there was a war between vampires and humans. The vampires lost, and the vampire king fell into a long sleep in order to regain his strength. Meanwhile, the humans decided to hunt down all the vampires and slaughter them. And now, you got awakened, the vampire king, to help the last vampire reach home safely. Long time ago,
All
there
right.
was a war between vampires and humans.
All right.
The vampires lost, and the
feel like we-
vampire king fell
got
into a long
very close to
sleep
the end
in
there.
order to
So-
regain his strength.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
All right.
the
Rob,
humans decided to
congratulations
hunt down all
on
the
a massive
vampires
amount
and
of
slaughter
vampire
them.
protection and cleaning
And
up the
now,
room.
you got awakened, the vampire
yeah,
king,
we've definitely
to help the last vampire
rearranged the
reach
furniture
home
faster
safely.
than I've ever seen happen before.
Thank you.
That was pretty good. So let's first talk through some predictions. Yeah. Number 1, guest will squat and not keep standing to follow the vampire. I guess that's talking more about posture. I wasn't paying attention. How did you feel you were like?
I wasn't necessarily trying to, but eventually I had to because apparently you can't feed the vampire by dropping people on them.
So you had to go down to get them. Okay. Number 2, guests will interact with the environment by picking items up with their hands.
Yeah.
And guests will put hands around the bat to protect it. This
Hands
seems like
around the bat. Yes.
around the bat, around the a little vampire. All right. Well, let's. I think that's seems about right. Let's back up. Who were you in this world?
I was the vampire king.
Right. And what were you doing?
I was protecting the last vampire very badly.
And how did you protect? Like, do you have a sense of like what that meant in the world?
It seemed like I was trying to prevent things from hitting the bat.
Do you have a sense of how good you were at that?
I didn't think I was very good because he died.
It's fair. Do you? Was that a surprise to you?
That the bat died?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it looked like it was trying to get to the house. It was at the house. Like,
Yeah. And actually, watching it, I was having trouble telling. Like, is the bat in danger? I mean, actually, the bat was in danger, but like, is it low on health? Is like basically some sense of progress on it.
I'd say that there were two different parts where I was protecting the bat. One was protecting it from the villagers, which were shooting something at it, like this white bullet or something. And that was very easy to defend from because I could see where it was coming from. There was a clear path. But the sun, I couldn't tell where it was. It seemed to keep changing direction, which the sun doesn't really do. So like sometimes it seemed like it was in front of me, sometimes it seemed like it was behind me, and so it was very hard to tell what was going on with the sun.
Yeah, and watching it, it was hard for me to tell if you were doing well or not. I could definitely see that you
Also that, yeah.
you had your hands around it, and I was like, that looks like you're doing a good job, but it was hard to tell if the world was rewarding that behavior. There's a moment in between where the little vampire asks for help,
Yeah.
What was that? What'd you have to do?
I had to feed the vampire several people.
How did you, when you had that, when we're asked of that, how did you figure out how to feed it people?
It seemed likely I was going to need to go find a person and hand it to the vampire in some way. And so that seemed to work the first time. That it was helpful that there was a counter on the bat. It was a little hard to read. I couldn't tell if it was out of focus or something, if that was the headset. But the bat was saying, I need 3 more people. I need 2 more people. I was a little surprised that the second person I dropped on the bat, like the first one I dropped on the bat and it seemed to eat it fine. The second one, it seemed to keep asking for more people. Like the person I dropped it on the bat, it disappeared, and it said I need 2 more people still. So that, I found that a little confusing.
Yeah. And how did you? I mean, it seems like you didn't have too much trouble finding people.
No, they were all over the place.
Okay, and I guess when they asked for people, were you like, oh, I've seen people already.
Yeah.
I know where to go.
Yeah.
So it feels like a lot of the guidance here was connecting really well. You knew who you were, what you were doing. The bat was a good focus. It seemed like I guess your hands looked a little different in this world than just normal hands.
In some cases, they looked like a shield, I'd describe it as. In other cases, they were just normal hands. And I think that was based on whether I was defending or if I was actually trying to pick up a villager.
Yeah, and so then with all of this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe your feeling of freedom in this world?
I felt like there was a pretty good deal of freedom. I mean, obviously, I took over the audience here a bit, but like I really liked being able to sort of explore the town. There was a lot going on in it. The people were all different, which I thought was really cool, and so I could see like there was a larger person, smaller people. And I felt like I wasn't really constrained other than by the chairs to walk around and basically explore the fullness of the city.
All right, so number 1 to 10.
Oh, sorry. 8.
All right. Yeah, well, thank you so much for being a guest in this, and we'll talk a little bit about the team things. Yeah, thank you, Rob. So yeah, one thing the world did a great job immediately, a very creepy world. Just the sound effects, the world has an emotion and a mood to it, which was really nice. And it seems like the world really worked well for clarity of what to do, how to do it, and sort of guiding all that thing through. Definitely had the challenge of how to shadow the vampire with the hands. Intuitively, it's a really clear directive, but the feedback just didn't seem to be there. I'm curious, was there feedback that Rob was missing, or how do you know?
So I can say I did see that there were sunbeams, and they
Yeah.
seemed to disappear. And occasionally it looked like a ball. The sun would hit the bat, but I couldn't. I felt like I had the bat fully covered by my hands, and it was dark, and then it died. So it was that's what was hard to tell. For me, it wasn't that I was unable to see the sun.
Yeah.
So the things on your hand is actually a shield, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they only appear when you're closer to the bat. So, and the things that are being thrown at the vampire, you can actually deflect them with your shield. That's how you protect the bat. The sun doesn't move; it's just there. It's just shooting those balls at the vampire.
I'll tell you what. Sometimes there were rays coming from I was facing generally this direction, right?
Right.
So sometimes there were these yellow rays coming from in front of me, and sometimes they were coming from behind.
You said so it actually the sun sent balls?
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
There were 2 or 3 small balls.
Yeah,
There were also
and-
these yellow.
Yeah, and I think some of this is just there's feedback in this world that says things, but to get the feedback to connect, it needs to have basically just more iteration of okay, does the feedback of a thing bouncing off the shield, because a lot of feedback is if you catch it, you might connect it, but if you don't see it in the moment, you might need iteration, you might need ways to see it more, and I think especially the sun, the feedback of I put my hand in front, I blocked it, I can tell it got blocked because I got this feedback, versus it went past my hand and hit. And so thinking about both positive feedback and negative feedback and how to really make that connect for the guest. That said, all of the interactions that you asked of the guest, like Rob, you knew what to do and you wanted to do them. I think you didn't have a problem of getting the guest to understand what to do. It's just a matter of like signaling success and signaling to that you're doing it right, which is where I would sort of like see that thing. Actually, Rob, a question about space and scale. How did it feel to walk around in this world?
I felt like a giant.
Okay.
Like because I was walking, like maybe I was supposed to be walking, but like I felt like I was walking around, and the people are all ankle height, right? So
Were you hesitant because the floor was full of stuff? Did you find yourself hesitant to like walk through things?
I started running into chairs.
Okay, so the chairs were your main obstacle, not the
I
glitch.
wasn't really hesitant because of the virtual.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, I think the mood you set with this world, the progression of interactions, really strong. I think you did a good job building variety to the end. Like the last little piece of just like getting the feedback to really register, and part of that is the ending was a bit of a surprise. I think like how do you signal that the bat is in danger, and so that moment of oh we might lose, it might end is clear, and I think that's sort of aiming for an emotional peak of excitement, and it sort of ended up being a missed point. But overall, like solid interactions, solid guidance, and I think the world came together really well. Thanks.
Team 28.
Mike, I think we are. This is the world you can do. Okay, good. Yes. Thank you. Ooh. Oh yeah. Well, just aiming at the conviction check. Oh, we need to be done by 3:20. Oh, we're good. Well, we're going to three pick up. But we need to explain that. A lot of little things we get to. So a little slow stuff.
You sound much like he's in the explorer. He's climbing all over. And he's good. Who's no,
Mike.
Do you want to do that both? Like, do you want the both of them? Yeah. It's adorable. There's no electric current, right? Just don't cross the beams. Right here? Right here. Cool. Do you guys have a start spring in yours? Do you have a start spring? No. Okay. Alright, and then in that case, Ferris, do you ever just trigger it from the podium? The only thing we'll be holding is this.
Long time ago, there was a war between vampires and humans. The vampires lost.
Okay, so not the control. Okay. Like a cannon?
Yeah. Yeah, that works.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Uh-oh. We are the ghosts of abandoned game ideas back for our revenge. We are going upstairs to haunt the bullpen, and you'll never stop us with just a silly vacuum.
I will stop them from going up to the 5th floor.
Thanks to you, the ETC is saved, and all the good ideas are back.
All right, Mike, Employee of the Month. Let's find out some predictions. By the way, I love the little ghost details on the envelope.
It was
All right.
fun. I felt like a Ghostbuster. This was great.
Prediction 1, the guests will look around the room and notice the ghosts.
Absolutely. I was looking all around.
There was a lot of looking around going on. The guests will walk around the room to get to the close to the ghosts. I think you walked at the beginning. I believe that by the end you were running to get to the ghosts.
Yeah, that was good. Good workout.
And then guests will suck up ghosts by aiming the vacuum.
Yes, absolutely. The vacuum noise was really good, so I knew to dwell on the target. That was good.
Yeah, so let's talk through this a little bit, Mike. Who were you in this world?
So I was a Ghostbuster. I had to save Drew and everybody else up on the 5th floor, make sure I caught all the ghosts down here. The RPIS, that context worked because I know the ETC, so I knew we were in the RPIS. I had to get the ghosts before they disappeared high. That was probably the only thing that fooled me a little bit because I knew the 5th floor is up there. I thought there'd be more ghosts from like here up, but most of the ghosts were from here down. But there was a little, real minor thing. I looked up a lot, and by the end I knew I didn't have to look up. I could just stay looking down.
Would the ghosts go up?
The ghosts will go up. The ghosts will go up. They spawn like really low.
Oh, so I was good. I grabbed them early. I grabbed them when they were spawning. Good.
It goes to the up this low, but you kill them at the beginning.
And this is an interesting thing about crafting guest experience, if one of the things that you want the guest to understand is if you're too slow, they will rise into the air and you won't be able to catch them. If they just pick up on it and go quickly, they might never get that feedback. And it's just, I mean, you understood it because the story set it up, which was, I think, a really good choice to set it up. But it's kind of a question of how do you give the guest a sense of stakes that if they don't do this, this thing will happen. And it is a relatively common, like, soft failure of the guest is too good, so they never learn what failure looks like, so they're never really that worried about failure. But I mean, to the credit of the world, like, you knew what to do, knew how to do it, and it seemed like you had a sense of how to do it decently well, too.
Yeah, and the nice thing, I liked that the ghosts changed from kind of a static blobby one to one that looked like it can escape, that had more arms, it was more withery. I don't know if it really was evading more, or I just, in my head, thought, oh, that ghost is evading more, and I have to stay constant with the vacuum on it to really suck it up. But just changing the art, at least put in my own head a story that, oh, there's different kinds of ghosts. Some are kind of bigger and lazier, and others are more wispy and they'll move around. And of course, the purple boss at the end was the different one.
So how did you know how to defeat the ghosts?
The vacuum sucking noise was really important, that I knew to go to it. I didn't feel like there was a trigger when I was there on the ghost and it was a sucking sound like a vacuum cleaner. It's like, oh, okay, dwell on it. It then popped. It's like, oh, I sucked it into my Ghostbuster machine. We're good.
And I think this is a really strong example of indirect control through interface. Like this physical prop, this world would be very different if you didn't have the prop.
Absolutely.
I think early on you were asking about how to hold it. I think the team mentioned like a cannon or something like that. But just the physical nature restrained like your options. And I think it became really clear, like the visuals matched up and you use it. And then absolutely the feedback of the audio and the visuals and that popping sound and like the ghost sort of popping and like the effect was a really lovely just combination of feedback that I don't think anyone in the room was confused about when you successfully sucked in a ghost and made that work.
Yeah. The art and the sound really worked to deliver that moment. And the mechanics are right. I had to be on the ghost before anything triggered. So all of you worked together to get that to work.
There was a final escalation to this world. Can you talk through like what that final battle was like?
So the final boss looked different. And he made more noises, maybe even more human noises. So it's like really trying to evade. So even though there was still at least one other ghost in the room, I decided not to play with anybody else except suck up the purple ghost.
And how would you describe like that ghost in terms of like defeating it? What did you have to do?
I felt I had to dwell on it longer, that its evasion was stronger than the rest. Again, I don't know if that was really programmed in or it was just me reading that. But so I felt like I might have had to move around more to stay on the ghost for a longer time to really suck it into the vacuum cleaner.
Did its size change? Yes. Okay. Yeah, so a subtle thing, it seemed like it shrank as you sort of like attacked it a few times. But probably, my guess is like watching it, I barely picked up on the size change. And my brain's like, is this shrinking to the point where you can finally suck it in? So it seems like there's a little story being told with the world building, but the clarity of that just wasn't quite there. Like you probably wanted to reinforce the sound effect of popping and then like have a clear visual change connected with that moment of success. So it's like clearly you did something right, and then the ghost changes state a little bit, and then you have to do it again. I think using that the feedback loop you had could have helped like that moment land. At the same time, you still knew enough to be successful. Like you're like, I'm just gonna keep going at it. I'm confident that if I keep doing this, I will eventually suck that ghost in and be successful.
Right.
So it's a good general description of feedback that it worked, even though the mechanic changed a little bit with the last ghost. And watching it like a very active world really used the space well. I think that the use of the RPIS was a great touch. Sort of gave it some reality. So it's a really strong mix of virtual and physical and all that stuff. The one thing I would look for is it did seem like you had just two types of ghosts, and I would wonder like how do you mix it up a little bit more? Because like you were doing well enough that they all stayed near the floor, and the ghost that evaded more was a nice escalation. And I was like, you have so much working, like you have now room to play with the mechanics, and I think this world could definitely expand. Like you could definitely add different moments with ghosts and like just use the cannon, the ghost vacuum cleaner in different ways, and the world would accept it really well. So I think really solid pieces all around. Scale of 1 to 10, feeling of freedom. How much freedom did you have?
Yeah, so I felt 9. I really did move around the space. The only thing I learned relatively early was, I don't need to look up anymore. So that was the only thing I would fix. If I'm getting everybody spawning low, start spawning in the middle or even spawning high. And then you'd get me to use all 3 dimensions. That I did this, X, Y really well, just not vertical as much.
Cool. All right, thank you, Mike. Good work, team.
Team 16.
So before we begin, I'd like to test something to see if people are awake. Can you read this? Okay, thank you.
All right, Sabrina's our guest.
Once upon a time, there was a kingdom where everything was black and white. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom where everything was black and white. The people who lived here were very sad. But today, we have a magician with us who can change the world. With a magic hat and wand, anything is possible. We'll paint the world with colors and make everyone happy again.
Let's talk a little bit about what you just went through. First, open up this envelope from Verizon, or to Verizon. Prediction 1. Guests will search the book for hints on how to continue.
I did not do that.
You definitely
I flipped through the book.
flipped through the book. I appreciate the intent of like looking through the book for hints. I think you look like you're looking for how to interact with the world.
I thought maybe flipping through the book would trigger something, but then the book closed and then it disappeared. And I realized later it kind of fallen off the table. But I expected the book to maybe transition the story or something, and then it didn't do that.
2, guests will try to burn other objects with the lit candle.
I didn't do that either, but I didn't get to the candle till very late. I did a lot of stuff before I got to the candles.
And 3, guests will look up at the sky when the balloons fly up.
I definitely did that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little about the sequence of stuff. Who were you in this world?
I was a magician, and I think, if I remember the intro, I don't know, there was a town that was sad and depressed and without color, and the magician came to town to return color to the town, or something along those lines.
And what did you do in this world?
I did magic tricks
How did you do magic tricks?
with my wand and my hats. Hi, kiddo. Do you want to come talk with me?
That's okay.
There we go.
Or this way. All right. Little guess here. So you had a hat and a wand.
I had a hat and a wand and
what-
a cape.
And one of the things, so the identity was pretty clear. You had these tools. It seemed like the wand had like you're waving around. Describe the world you're in. Do you have a sense of like what the
Really
world?
just a table. There was like a little patch of sky that turned blue later, and then there was this sort of dreary rainbow that changed color, got brighter as I actually succeeded with the magic.
So now that you sort of went through the world, can you describe what success in this world was and how you got to it?
My impression, I had to cast all the magic tricks, and the more magic tricks I cast, the more color and sound and celebration was taking place in the world. And the more I got the applause sign.
Can you describe any of the spells you cast? So like any of those moments?
Yes, I pulled a rabbit out of the hat, put a rabbit back in the hat. I made balloons appear. I made fireworks go off. I pulled out 2 candles, then I lit the candles with a wave of my wand. I actually don't know. I put the hat in the rainbow and sparkles came out, which was the first interaction that felt magical. That besides the glowy tip of the wand. But I don't know if I had to do that. Now I feel like if I just turned the hat upside down from the beginning and stuck it back on the table, it would have been.
So I'm curious for the team, where are the magic tricks we're trying to sort of discover here? Because I feel like there's a connection between the hat, and magic tricks, and the rainbow that is maybe a little hard to figure out at the moment. So how does this world sort of work? Do we have another? That one's dead over there.
So there were 3 tricks, like represented by the 3 colors on the rainbow. And so first one was a flower that you would take out and then change the color randomly. And then the second one was lighting the candle, and the third one was just like interacting with the bunny.
So each one was sort of like had a different, like it was like have it come out and then do something with it, with a little bit like the pattern here, which I think you were sort of getting to, like you were discovering that.
The balloons and the fireworks weren't my magic. They were reactions to my magic.
Well, and watching this, like one of the things you did really early on was you put the hat on your head, I believe.
I did. I totally thought, I totally thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Take on the role.
And one of the things about your world that is, really bold and impressive is the freedom you gave Sabrina to sort of explore and like work on things. Like you let her put the hat on the head and you got feedback on that, right? Like the hat sat on the head, which is great. Like there's room for that. But at that point, you sort of like were trying to figure out what the role of the hat was, it seemed. And it being on your head was.
The head made me feel like I did the right thing. And then I took it off, but I didn't
I'm curious when you're playtesting, what sort of like, what are the steps and what, especially the behavior you saw in your guess, that the beginning sort of goes in a more straightforward way? Like what was the behavior you saw in playtesting?
So we did see that like some people didn't flip the hat upside down, and that was one of the hints that we had to give for some of them, but then some people just like intuitively kind of just tossed it until it turned around, maybe by accident. And then there was one person, Ricardo, actually, he put the hat on his head and then didn't, like just like you, didn't know what else to do with it.
Well, and I think the understanding that the world sort of needed this hat to happen, that would be a question of like, how do you get a guest to do that? Like you have a lot of, as like actually Sabrina, as you went through, a lot of different options. You could hold it, like I think she held it and tapped it. She tried to catch things with it. She put it on her head, and there's a lot of variety that you can do with a hat that is, you know, possible. So how do you guide the guest to get the hat in the middle? I think that's one thing I would look for is like, how do you get that first moment to be really solid? And then once we're there, my guess is the sequence follows more naturally. And that's probably like one of the things that I would look at on iteration is like, how do you sequence this? How do you get it so the guest has a starting point and then a next point? And like, it feels like if you get the guest into that place, the world will go more smoothly. But if the guest struggles to like catch that, they're looking for the information, looking for feedback, and trying to learn things. And only by the end were you learning things and it was still a little bit out of it. What does the book do in all this? Is it just hints in some sense?
Yes, so it was made so that like you could revisit the story in the beginning if you perhaps missed it. But also during playtesting, we found that like a lot of people would try to like look at the book for guidance while they were confused with the rest of the objects. And so
and also the congratulations page after you succeed, we will the book will reopen to you like a congratulations, and finally the credits page.
And after playtest, we changed the hat. So all the hat is like upside down in the book. So we hope to give some hint to the player when they reread the book.
Yeah, and I remember from Interim, like the one visual of the hat was like it was on the table. At the same time, like it's a hat. And like it's one of the challenges in playtesting and like designing this, like how do you send all those signals and connect them in a way that the guests will get them? And I think part of it is like, you probably just need a few more. Like it's not that you didn't have any, it's that you had them there, but you need to sort of catch guests at different moments, like one who's paying attention to this and that. I really love like the sort of dynamics of this of, you know, you set up the story and like use the hat, like it's a world that has a lot of like, the guest does own it and work through it. And like, it does feel like at that point when you get to the end, you can sort of feel like you really succeeded. And I really love the idea of using the audience as feedback. The applause sign was a brilliant idea. And I'm curious, Sabrina, did
As soon as I saw the applause sign, I was like, I feel good about doing this world because I know at some point everyone in the room is going to be clapping for me.
And it's a really good thing to note just about the setup. You gave Sabrina a cape. There's a lot of stuff going on here, which is like setting her role and the expectation. And so the world was just ready for these moments to happen, which was really nice to see. And it's just like, I think the hat became a little bit of a sticking point of like, how do you get it to flip over and know what to do? And it sounds like in playtesting, you saw that there was some variability there and how to make that work. I'm curious, scale of 1 to 10, feeling of freedom.
10, in terms of what I could do, yeah, I felt super free. I just didn't know how to generate consequences for my actions. But in terms of like what I was allowed to do, I felt very free.
Yeah, I mean, and seeing how far you're able to go with your own exploration and then even recover from that is another testament to the world, that the world enabled you to do things and you sort of explored your way to the end. Anyway, good work, team.
Thank you.
Team 18.
pond over here on Dave's desk.
It's not my pond.
It's now kind of on these chairs. Glad I can at least see the chairs. No. Let's see. Frozen mushrooms. Guess I'll read the instructions again. Pond, more mushrooms, another pond. So we got 3 ponds. Where's the pond? Walk down the path. There's no path. There's a path towards the cocoon again. Something with the hands. The wizard says, walk down the path through the snow to the cocoon, and there will be butterflies. Oh, we got a snowflake. Hey, some snowflakes. I haven't done anything though. I don't really want to like punch this guy in the face trying to grab the cocoon. Oh, that red circle. Looks like I'm in Doctor Strange, right? Step to the boundaries of the box. Maybe I have to grab this butterfly. No. Oh, something happened. Hey! I know, it feels really pathetic, right? It's flying. That's one butterfly, so I gotta catch more butterflies? Are there more butterflies? Oh, there's some butterflies. Okay. It feels weird though, because like I want to be nice to the butterflies. Maybe I have to catch them gently. No, they do anything. I don't know. That sounded good. Oh, we got trees. Still no apples. And it looks like the mushrooms unfroze. That's good. It's weird though, because like, again, like you don't, you grab one, that feels too rough for the butterfly. Okay, more flowers. I like these sunflowers. These are pretty cool. Oh, but disappeared. Or I'm inside of it. Oh, hey, credits! John Butterfly!
Alright, John. Let's see what the team predicted.
I probably failed all of your metrics, sorry.
I think you got there. Prediction 1. The player will touch the first blue butterfly.
I mean, it took a while.
Yeah, but you got there. I mean, I believe you could feel the relief in the classroom when you found the blue butterfly.
Yeah. It's weird because I feel like once I got to the end of the instructions, I was supposed to go do something, and then I didn't see the butterfly as like an extension of the instructions.
I think we'll sort of dig into some of this in a second.
Yeah, yeah.
Number 2, you will look around the environment as it changes, I think.
Yeah, it was kind of changing really fast, because the swarm of butterflies was all there, so I was like grabbing them quickly, and I didn't really get to enjoy the changing of the environment.
Yeah. And 3, you collect the butterflies with different colors.
It didn't even occur to me to do that, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk a little about your exploration of this, because I think the beginning is a really interesting like window into what you're trying to figure out and what the world was. So I guess, where were you at the beginning?
I was in like a bleak eternal winter.
Mm-hmm. And what are you supposed to do in this world, as you understood it at the beginning?
I was supposed to bring life back by doing something with the butterflies.
Yeah.
And I thought originally it seemed like it was something with the chrysalis itself, not necessarily with the butterflies, because I didn't see that there were butterflies.
And in that opening scene, there were a bunch of things.
There were
And
a lot of things.
You explored around, so you had these instructions sort of floating there.
Yeah.
But you also had a pond.
The ponds were cool.
I think you mentioned there was like mushrooms.
Frozen mushrooms and trees. Yeah.
And I think the cocoon is there too, right?
The cocoon is sort of there, but it's not really in the play space.
Yeah.
Which was confusing, I think.
And you did a great job sort of talking through this. I think you talked about the 3 scenes of instructions. And it's like your job is to bring spring back.
Yep.
And there's this middle scene, which is of showing a magician and the cocoon and doing magic.
I thought that was like how you brought Spring back, because that was the next step. So I was like, okay, I got to magic the chrysalis somehow.
And I think this is a good moment of just sort of like seeing a guest who's like trying to understand the rules, possibly like reading the rules not the way you intended. I think one thing that became clear is like you saw step, basically introduction, then step 1. It's like you're trying to figure out, how do I do step 1?
Yeah.
And you're looking around for the space.
Especially when you know it's a game and you have to do something, the first thing I'm looking for is like, what do I have to do?
And it's notable that although that blue butterfly was right there, next to the instructions didn't tell you or give you a hint about going to the butterfly.
It wasn't like a big red arrow that was like, see butterfly right here.
And in some sense, I applaud this. Like you guys,
Yeah.
giving direct instruction is sort of not part of the assignment. Like the assignment is like, don't give direct instruction.
Yeah.
So you sort of left a guide in here about like sort of like the role you're supposed to play.
Yeah.
That you are a magician bringing this back. But then you have this next step.
I feel like I also would have noticed the butterfly if it was just flying around the space. Like the rest of the space was so bleak that you actually probably didn't even need any of the instructions. Like it could have been bleak winter and had one colorful butterfly flying around, and I would have been attracted to it and tried to catch it or touch it, and that would have triggered something. And then I would have been like, oh, and then there would have been more butterflies flying around, and by that time I already have the basic mechanic. Does that make sense?
And this is the thing we see a lot, which is you actually had even though the space was not full yet, I think it was a really good choice to have the beginning be relatively empty. You had enough things that had different levels of attention that you were sort of like trying to figure out, where does this world want to focus me?
Yep.
And the reality is the butterfly was really small. And like it's a sort of a question of how do you...
Or because it was colored, it also blended into the colors of the instructions, right? As like one unit. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And it's like it's probably the case that just the iteration would be to pull some stuff back. Like you had a lot of options, and when you're in the world in the first place, you're trying to understand the rules, trying to understand like what does this world want me to do, and the world had a bunch of signals, and only one of them was the true signal. Now, once you got past that, it seemed like things moved.
Yeah, they went
much
really
more
quick,
clearly.
and I felt like once I was like, oh, part of it was the build-up, because I was like, oh, I got to figure this thing out, I got to figure this thing out, I got to figure this thing out. I figured it out, and then I'm like, I'll just do it a bunch, right? Like when you figure out how to jump in a game, you're just like jump, 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 jump. So I was like butterfly, 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 right? And that made the pacing of the transformation tough, because then I didn't really take the time to look around after each one, right? Because they were all clustered.
But to that end, you learned exactly what you needed to learn.
I did.
Which was butterflies are the key to transformation.
Yep.
And you sort of like interact with them by reaching out and sort of catching them in a virtual way.
Yep.
And I think that trajectory was really solid. And like having that pacing, and notably, I'm kind of wondering, you were observing the yellow flowers coming in. Was there an animation on the cocoon that we missed?
Yeah. I didn't see that at all, because I was too busy looking at all the transformation in the one moment that I did look at the transformation, right?
And I think that's just a little piece of how do you get the attention of the guest? Like, how do you sort of like get it?
I feel bad that I missed it, actually. I'm sure it was beautiful. I'm sorry you spent so much time on it and I didn't get to see it.
And I like just how you did this like very light amount of instruction. Like you gave him a sense of a role and a place, and it came together. Did you have a sense of progress? So I guess here's a question.
Yeah.
How did you complete this world? Like what was success ultimately?
I think success was the giant butterfly appearing at the end. That seemed pretty clear.
Why did it appear when it did?
But the thing is, I didn't notice that it appeared until I saw the credits. So I knew I had reached the end before I saw the giant butterfly.
Do you have any sense of what triggered the giant butterfly?
My sense is that I caught enough butterflies that the big butterfly appeared. But I don't know if that's right at all.
I think the truth is the chrysalis was getting colored stripes.
Oh, for each butterfly.
Based on the
that I caught.
butterflies.
But I wasn't looking at the chrysalis enough to notice that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And that also makes sense why some butterflies I wasn't able to catch because I'd already gotten that color.
And that piece, I mean, in some sense, like this world was very successful. Like you got, in fact, one of the really nice things was you spent the beginning trying to figure things out, and you had the freedom to do that.
Yeah, that was
like
great.
you came around, you tried things, and you came back around, and you got to the butterfly, and you got through the world. And it's one of the harder things to have a world that's resilient in that way, to get a place where the guest is like searching and discovering, and then they figure it out and get going. And I think the place of iteration would be, how do you then connect the feedback? So you're sort of like controlling the guest's attention. So they get this and they see the effect, and then they sort of connect those dots in that last little piece. Because I think the beautiful dream guest is one who catches some butterflies and then learns that they connect to the cocoon.
Great.
And then realizes they have one more to go, and very intentionally catches the last butterfly, not just to catch it, but to see the completion moment. And their attention is now ready for the cocoon. And in some sense, you were a step away from learning that. You'd learned to catch butterflies, but you hadn't quite connected them to progress.
Part of it had to do with space. Like I was over here when I finally got the butterfly, and then I like turned to the cocoon to see if it did anything, and there was this swarm of butterflies, and I was like, right? If they had come in from different sides or been spaced out further, I would have had to do more work to catch each individual one and move around, which would have then given me more time to pay attention to what was happening.
All right, so scale of 1 to 10, how much freedom did you feel you had in this world?
That's a good question. I feel like I had a lot of freedom, but not a lot of agency in the beginning because I wasn't able to actually do anything. Does that make sense? So I would call that like an 8, maybe?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, no problem.
Good work, team.
I've got a question. Did you guys each intentionally wear a different color? It looks really good.
A+ for fashion.
When you in a different order now. All right, good work, team.
Team 20.
All right, 20. Ooh, all right, let's do it. Clear, let me grab the predictions.
Where's my present? Where's my present? Oh my god, it's taking forever. Where's my present? Where's my present? Give me the present.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my god, this is taking forever. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah, it's just what I want. Yeah, it's just what I want. Yeah, thank you.
Is it it? Okay, we can show the video of the final scene. All right, I think we've gotten to success. Hooray! Is there a final scene you want to show on video? All right, we show that. While I open up the predictions. What? Yeah, no, we'll see the final scene of the video. Yeah, just jump to the ending.
This is what I want. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, we have a microphone going around. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Laura.
Hello.
All right, let's look at the predictions. Here you go, team. You have a microphone. So, prediction 1. Guests will first grab a gift and wrap the gift. I think.
I did eventually get there, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
no, I'm trying to think. What was the first thing you brought from the tree to the presents? Was it the shoes, right?
It was the shoes, yeah.
I think you wrapped the shoes relatively quickly.
Yeah.
2, they will chase after the tree to grab a gift.
Sure.
Did you feel like you had to chase the tree?
I felt the tree was chasing me, actually.
Okay.
Because it, like, compared to everything else, it was huge and it was like stalking me from behind.
Some ambiguity about the behavior of the tree, and was it like running away? And 3, they will give the big gift to the tree, which I think the ending seemed to may have had some technical problems. But let's talk through, Rob, who were you in this world?
I'm going to go with, I was St. Nicholas.
All right. And what were you doing, and who were the other characters in this world?
There was like 5 kids who each had sort of their own interests, which I thought was great because the athlete, at least I got from the clothing, eventually they've told me what their interests were, which I thought was really helpful. And I was picking gifts off the tree to give to them.
And what was your sense of success in this world? What were you trying to achieve?
So I think at first I was just thinking I was trying to get gifts to the kids, but then I started to realize that there were particular gifts that went to particular kids. And in some cases there was more than one that seemed to map to
I noticed that
kid.
It seemed like you spent a lot of your time sort of working with the gifts, and you were trying to do things at various times. It seemed like you were frustrated at times. I'm just trying to what was the moments of frustration you had?
I think what I ran into was at first it looked like there was only one gift per kid. So I thought that each kid, there were 5 boxes in front of 5 kids, and I thought the box was the thing the kid was going to get. And I had picked up these shoes and given them to the athlete, and then the tree had turned around or something, and I saw a soccer ball, and I was like, well, that's a much better gift for the athlete, right? Like, he already has shoes. I can see he's wearing them. Like, he should have a soccer ball. So then I couldn't figure out how I could, like, empty the box and put in the better gift. So I eventually started, like, trying to trade an empty box and maybe give it to someone else before some of the other wishes of the kids became clear.
And I think near the end, you successfully gave a child 2 gifts.
Yes.
And it was like, at that moment, it's like, oh, you could do 2.
Right. So now I was like, well, I had seen these other good gifts for these kids, but I had run out of boxes.
Is the world about giving each child 2 gifts? At least one. And it's an interesting thing that flexibility actually caused some confusion, because you were wondering, like, how do I choose between these?
I had started that way, and then, like, one of the boxes, I think maybe I knocked a box into one of the kids, and so I realized there was a second step to giving a kid their gift. It wasn't, like, final when the boxes were there. So once I had that, I was like, well, I can just put more gifts into boxes and hand them over. So.
And it's interesting to note all of these different interactions. So the open gift boxes seem to, like, do a good job of attracting you to things go in the boxes.
Yeah.
You understood, like, it's not a super common thing to have a Christmas tree with big bubbles on it that have gifts in them, but you seem to be pretty quickly be like, oh, I see the tree. There's things on the tree. I can pull them off. It seems like the last piece of the gift then goes to the child, and the child sort of needs to hold it, was a step that took a while to understand.
Yeah.
Part of it was, it seemed like the state change wasn't obvious. Like, those kids were standing there right next to the gift. Like, are they going to reach for it? I'm kind of curious. Like,
well, I also like that some of the kids were, like, really excited about the gift, right? So when the athlete got, I can't remember if it was the shoes or the soccer ball in the box that was in front of them, he started to jump up and down, like, yes, I'm getting the good gift. And so I thought that was almost the response that.
Yeah, actually, watching it myself, like, I saw the kid bouncing. I was like, oh, that's a victory state. And that's the thing in Worlds, is giving partial feedback. Sometimes you teach the guest the wrong thing. It's like, that wasn't just progress, that felt like success. But there was a hidden state beyond that you had to get to. And it seemed like this world was a little bit about discovering the state changes and, like, finding those moments. The bubbles over the kids' heads, they weren't there at the beginning, were they?
No.
Do you know how they showed up?
I have no idea how they showed up.
How did they get triggered? Oh. Okay, so they show up. Why did you put those in? I kind of love that. Like, this is like some really nice design where you picked up pretty quickly. You looked at the kids and, like, oh, shoes, athlete. I think it looked like you looked down at their feet.
Well, I had picked up shoes off of the tree, and I was like, well, maybe one of them needs shoes, but they're all wearing shoes.
And so the indirect control of gifts going to kids and trying to imagine what they might want totally worked. Which was a really nice design. But I love the fact that you had a timer running, which is like, if the guest is still struggling, they might be struggling with this. So we're going to have the kids think about what they want. So it was really nice to see that reinforcement of that goal in the world.
The other thing it did for me was it let me know that there were it sort of confirmed there's specific gifts that go with each kid, which wasn't as obvious.
Yeah, no, it was a really nice touch. The tree was an interesting character in all of this. How would you describe the Christmas tree?
It was described as the angry tree in the caption, but, like, I don't know. It felt like it was, like, stalking me or something. Like, I think when I was seeing the boxes and there was nothing else there, I was like, well, there's a tree somewhere, right? And I turned around and it's, like, right on top of me, which was sort of a bit of a surprise. So the angry isn't the word that comes to mind for this. It was sort of like, in your face. Like,
when you saw the video with the ending, that the last thing was a gift for the tree.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel, given that you'd been through the experience?
I I don't know. It seems like I just taken a whole bunch of this tree's stuff, so maybe that makes sense that the tree should have a gift as well.
All right, and on a scale of 1 to 10 for feeling of freedom, how much freedom do you have?
I'm gonna go with 9, only because like I thought there was a huge amount of freedom with like picking the gifts and putting them in boxes, and then eventually I figured out how I could like swap the boxes and give them to the kids, but like I couldn't take something out of a box, or I couldn't figure out how to take something out of a box once it was in there. I did at the end, but it wasn't clear that throwing a gift out would give me a box back.
And it's a common, I think it's a thing we've been seeing kind of all day, which is the guest knows what they want to do, and they have a sense of that. And the way you do it in the world is very specific, and they can't figure out how to do that specific action to make what they want happen. And it's like for you, like that mix of, oh, I find a better gift, I want to change it out. It's a very natural reaction. And actually, you guys built in a way to do that, but that specific sequence of steps, there was really nothing in the world that said, oh, okay, here's how you learn that action. That said, you were able to like work your way through the interfaces in a way that worked surprisingly well, I think. Like there's moments of frustration, but the world ultimately carried you through.
This was, I enjoyed this one. It had I really liked the giving of the gifts, and I thought the art on the kids was great.
Yeah. And I think it's a really a strong point that the kids themselves worked so well to indicate what to do. And this could have been, I mean, in some sense, this world is a really simple matching game. But because the kids signaled what they wanted and they reinforced your role, it certainly, like the way you're talking through this, it sounded like you were thinking about giving gifts to kids, matching the right gift, making them happy, which is a nice, really nice design to get to from just match, red to red or something like that. So great work, team.
Thank you.
All right, John, you're up. Last team. The door has seen shut.
Try it on the doors. You dumbass. You have my thanks.
There's my sword. Oh, there's the hat. All right, I think the helmet and the chest piece are in the hallway, so out of range. But we might show the video to show you. I think we've got a sense of what you need to do.
What a rare guest out here. Hey, you, look over here. Long story short, I lost my armor and sword because I'm too tired to move around, so I really need you to get them for me. These gems are all you need to get around the castle.
You guys know what we need to see, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, that's like here. That's like very, probably like, yeah, right there's good.
And the video faster.
You have my thanks.
All right. Quick play. All right, let's talk through. We'll sort of get to some of what the world means. Predictions. The player will enter the virtual world. I believe by that you mean the portal, not just the world itself. Player will grab the sword. Definitely grab the sword. There's a lot of, like, the sword was central to a lot of this. It was the height of all the drama was the sword. And the player will bring the sword and the armor to the knight. I think you seem to get that was the goal. So I guess let's start at the beginning. Who are you in this world?
Since I missed like the whole intro, it's hard to say. It feels like I'm, like it feels like some weird isekai thing. Like I'm just like coming from my world into some fantasy world, and there's a knight who's like clearly had some weird stuff happen to them, and I'm trying to help them somehow. And there's this magic door that leads to different parts of some crazy mystic castle.
Is that fair? And I guess I'm wondering, that door, it seemed like over time you figured out how to make it work. How does that door work?
So you put the different little floaty crystal things into the triangle in the middle of the door, and that changes the location that you have.
How did you figure that out?
I mean, in the beginning, I was trying to figure out if you had to line it up like it was some kind of puzzle, like you just like looked through it, that it would do a thing. But then once I figured out that the triangle stuck to my hand, it was clear I had to put them someplace, and I feel like the triangle as well made that obvious that that's where it would go.
And then you were going through, sort of talk about the armor stuff. How did you figure out what you needed to do and like the sort of the overall goal in this world was?
I think it was pretty obvious once you saw the first room that had armor. I mean, I guess the sword was confusing because I was like, is the sword for the knight or is the sword for me?
Mm-hmm.
But once I saw the other pieces of armor, once I saw that flash of the helmet before it changed to the other world, I knew that I was probably finding armor for this dude.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, feeling of freedom.
Having played it, it feels like there's actually a lot of freedom because there's different combinations of things you can go and places you can, things you can do and places you can go. So I would say like a 9.
That sounds good.
10, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right, let's sort of unpack this a little bit. So, a very ambitious world. Like, you have like a lot of different interactions, and I think a fair point, a lot of freedom. Like you left that, you could leave the sword behind, you could bring it with you, you could put it there. The triangles are things you could use. You're communicating with the knight on the floor. You have to like navigate through the space. You have to open a door. The world's kind of weird. Like there isn't, it's not like we're stepping into a known space and we just understand what to do because it's a common thing. Like the idea of a door that has a magical portal to another land, and you change that portal to different places by using these floating, like tetrahedron things, is super weird. But I think it's a credit to the world that the pieces connected, and.
Yeah, the structure felt very fairy tale-like in the sense that like, oh, there's 3 things, you have to do the 3 stuff to make the thing happen. Like that part felt familiar from a lot of stories of games.
And I think one of the things, like 2 things that stood out as like really strong moments, the sword melting the ice was a moment of like feedback that both clarified what the sword did, because the sword wasn't super obviously on fire, but when it melted the ice, it like reinforced the visuals, and it seemed like you were on like, okay, I've got a flaming sword, it melts ice. And the other one was the character on the ground was clearly missing pieces, and when you saw those pieces, it's like, oh, I know where they go.
Well, the thing is, when I first saw him, I didn't think he was missing armor.
Yeah.
I thought he had been like somebody had stolen all of his stuff and left him with just his pants, basically, right? And so I was like, wow, poor guy. I thought he was dead because I didn't see the talking or anything. And so I was like, well, that's a warning that I've got to be careful around here. And then once I saw the armor, then it became more obvious that it was the armor of the guy.
Yeah, and so I think that's exactly how I'd expect it to work out, is that the character doesn't describe a need immediately, but when you find a piece, your brain connects that. And I think those connections were working in this. The one that was the most confusing to me was those little swirling triangles. The fact that they went to the door and changed the property of the door was an interesting little leap, because they didn't clearly, I would expect them to like match the door more clearly. They seemed a little more abstract, and like.
Once they started swirling, it was hard to tell what they looked like. Once I figured out that they were different colors, though, then I was like, oh, these are different keys to something.
And you mentioned at one point, have I done red or green? Which one have I done? I think there's a place to help the guest understand state. Like, I think if the worlds had been much more clearly color coded, like this is the red one, this is the blue one, this is the green one, there might. Yeah, I think there's some things for memory, but for the technical challenges that we're sort of like faced with, but the ambition of this world, I think you managed to navigate it in a really compelling way. The ending is it a little bit of like, what is the ending of this that we saw in the video? Do we?
You are the naive guest. Like you have assisted this villain unintentionally, and he's why the kingdom is destroyed. So you kill him, but like not very well.
So you intend the guest to kill the knight at the end. How do you kill the knight? With the sword? Okay. Another question, there's like a model of a castle in the room. What was that? Did that?
That was really hard to figure out. Like in retrospect, maybe the triangle things were floating over the parts of the castle that they took you to, but I couldn't really. One of them was like floating in space over here, so that was hard. And it was difficult because once I got the sword stuck in it, I couldn't figure out how to get the sword out. So that led to like the small victory when you like figure out the sword sticking to the bottom of the table and you can still grab it. That part was fun. Some of that stuff was fun. Just glitches are fun.
So I guess, did that model of a castle have purpose?
He was right on.
Okay. So it's a little guide, it's a little map to the space. Gotcha. And this is, I think a great example of a world with a story and purpose and meaning that is, for lack of a better word, weird. Like you're bringing a lot that's new to the guest. And some of this is the guest having to like see these things and piece it together. I think that lends a lot of mystery to it. It certainly is a challenge to get through some of the confusion, but like I said, you worked your way through it.
It was fine. It felt a little bit escape roomy in that way, and that there were like puzzles that I had to figure out that had multiple steps involved. But I think in some ways that makes for a longer and more satisfying play experience because it took me a while to figure out what to do, and then it took me a while to figure out each step and follow it all.
I have confidence that if we had been calibrated such that you could have gotten the pieces of armor, that you would have gotten them. And that moment would have been satisfying partially for the struggle. The moment of the sword stuck in the model of the castle was kind of epic. It's a little virtual moment, but the fact that you knew what you needed to do, you had enough control to make it happen was.
I was worried that the handle was stuck inside the castle, so that I literally didn't know where it was enough to grab it. And so seeing it actually had gone through the table was like, oh, thank goodness, right? So that felt like a lot of relief.
Yeah. Anyway, great job, team. All right. All right. Round 2 complete. Congratulations, everyone. A very successful round 2, I'd say. Definitely a little bit of a lesson in the grabbing mechanic in the quest is imperfect at times. But that's one thing to appreciate is you are designing for technology that isn't necessarily designed for this. You're designing for a single playthrough moment. The quest is designed for someone to own it and to get good at it, to get used to it, for flexibility and possibilities as opposed to instantaneous understanding and usability. And like the controllers and the hand controls take a little bit of nuance. And when you're designing a short 3-minute experience where you do it once, you need to think possibly beyond those interfaces because they're not designed for that. When you see things that are designed in that space, like you think about like amusement park attractions, they simplify interfaces radically. They eliminate buttons. They play test in a way that they find all the gestures that may work, and then they make sure the system can catch them all. Or they really restrain the guest in terms of what they can do. And you all are playing in this balance between the hands and the controllers that let you have a lot of freedom and possibilities, but how do you get the guest to use that reliably, not over time and learning in 3 hours, but like now, immediately. And it's a very real, very challenging design problem. All right, that said, we are a little over time, but we're gonna try to quickly go over some things. TAs, you've got some stuff. I'm going to, I guess you guys can go ahead. You want me to introduce round 3 before we goes? All right, we're going to talk about round 3. All right, round 3. Let's zoom in a little bit more. So, round 3 is a lightning round. You have 1 week for round 3. That said, so the time is a very real constraint. You have no interim. We're going to go straight to final next week. On the other side of it, the goal of this round is radically simplified. The goal is just make something that is fun to do. It's an activity. One little thing, you are welcome to provide as much instruction as you need. You might want to think a little bit about the lessons of Naive Guest, but if you need to be very explicit, be very explicit. Our goal is to get to a place that's fun. So when we think about just what we care about, it is like the rubric is the base 3, originality, appeal, and engagement, and it's mainly around engagement. And for the most part, we want you to really think about scope and to find a way to focus. As it says here, remember kids, keep it simple, stupid. Building this out for elaborate backstory, really going deep on all the things you might want to do, building the world out, not as important as just in the moment, are we engaged? Can we jump in? Do we want to do it again? All those little pieces. This is a world that people should be having fun, should be laughing. It's probably going to be less about serious worlds, maybe more about funny worlds. But just thinking about that spirit of having fun is where we're going with this. On Thursday, we kind of went through an exercise around thinking about ideas and scoping. Some of that may want to come back. With all of that, one thing to note is we have some different platforms that are available this time. So let's talk about that. I know, has anyone seen this game? I'm holding this game up in my head as like a recent release of games that embodies the spirit of round 3. This is a real game. All right, that's Trombone Champ. Like I said, real game. But it's really just about the fun and kind of ridiculousness of pretending to be a trombone player, playing songs, having no real skill in the space, and just being fun, messing up, being rewarded for being good, better, but maybe not so good at all. So this game is seeing a lot of attention, partially just because it's a very direct, clear activity that is fun. Now, you're not going to make Trombone Champ. This is in a week, but you might make something that's in the similar space. You might take a crazy activity and say, what if? And add it to a platform and make something cool. With that, we've got some platforms. Oops. All right, one of them is the Toby Eye Tracker. This lets you track someone's eyes. And you can make an entire experience around just using eyes as input. Generally, for this platform, we would expect you to only use the eyes as input. We have some leeway, but this is eye tracking as a primary way of interacting with the world. I'll show you a quick snippet of a world that did this.
Ah, good to see you. I've heard a lot of good things about you so far.
As a quick setup, this is a world about doing a virtual interview, and your job is to maintain eye contact with the interviewer while also filling out your pre-interview survey because you forgot to do it, and you have to fill it out just in time as you go through so he doesn't catch on that you didn't fill it out. And as you watch the questions...
the questionnaire? Don't worry, I'll check that after the interview. Here at Paperclip Pushers Ltd, we only hire the brightest and most dedicated. Paperclip folding won't just be your job, it will be your life. This reminds me of when I first started in the paperclip industry. It was only in 1899 when William Middlebrook of Waterbury, Connecticut, developed the oval shape that we know today and started mass producing it. Isn't that astoundingly interesting? It's 100% true. Enough about paperclips, though. Let's see here. You graduated from Carnegie Mellon. That's okay. My ex-wife graduated from Carnegie Mellon as well. Well, let's not get into that right now. Your experience. You seem to have a lot of folding-related experience. I'm quite impressed. Origami club in school, napkin folding on the weekends, and a whole 3 years at Paper Planes Incorporated. Why aren't you paying attention? All I can say is, wow. My ex-wife, well, my other ex-wife, used to work at Paper Planes Incorporated as well. She was a lot different than my first ex-wife. She was more free, someone you could hold on to, but then, sorry again. So let's see. You're from Pittsburgh, correct? Did you know that during World War II, Norwegians weren't allowed to wear buttons or brooches in support of the king by the Nazis, so they wore paperclips in protest. This majestic product has such a rich history. It's a symbol of rebellion amongst the masses. So now I know what you're wondering. What is daily life like at Paperclip Pushers?
So that's a good example. They use keyboard and mouse, but man, that world is very much about eye contact. It's an interesting way to think about how would a guest interact with the world where the eyes are central. Other platform, we have Vive, and the Vive is less about using the headset and the controllers. It's much more about using the trackers. So these are trackers you can strap to things, you can mount to things. Example of this. This is not a VR world, by the way.
Ready? Ready? Ready?
We also have this upstairs. We've never used this before. It's really mainly a very fancy chair, but you can attach the Vive trackers and sort of track it, because you kind of need a sense of like where it's the whole thing tilting versus where you're looking. But yeah, like there's a very good chance if you use this, you'd make a flying world. At least that's just a guess. And we have these. I gave you a little hint of these. These are now set up there. These are the Ecto boots. We've got a quick, we never used these before either. This is what they do.
That's really cool. I really feel like I'm walking forward in the room. And I'm almost like subconsciously thinking, am I going to hit the end of my play space? This is screwing with my brain. That is remarkably convincing.
So they let you just walk forever, and they will slowly just pull you back to the middle.
I can clearly tell that there are things on my feet, weird things
They
are happening
also
under my
weigh
feet, and
12
balance
pounds
is off.
each. So when you
However,
walk, you
I am
have
convinced
weights
that
on your
I'm
feet.
way farther away from the origin point than I thought. Like my brain is absolutely buying this.
But they are, what would you do with these in VR? There's a good chance you won't run, but you might really focus on the idea of walking somewhere. This world probably wouldn't make a very good round 3 world. I believe you're walking around an oil field turning dials. Not exactly the most thrilling activity. These are actually designed for training. We have a set that are in sort of prototype form, and we've been working with the company, so we have those set up. And it's a question like, what would you do with these? The one thing about these is, before you really commit to an idea, everyone on the team should try it. Because the way it looks and the way it feels are very different. And then the other platform, if you look back at what we are offering, we're also offering the Quest 2. If you want to sort of stick with the VR. At the end of the day, this is all about just making something fun and being creative and bringing that to life. So we're going to be very supportive of the platforms. We're going to have some stuff. And so with that, the TAs can talk. I guess really quickly, any questions? What do you mean by your own? Oh, you want to use the index controllers like that? We could probably support it. The thing is, we're pushing you away from using the controllers. That said, I think the knuckles or the index controllers are a bit more hand-oriented. Maybe. In general, one of the reasons why we're pushing some of these platforms is their simplicity. The Vive trackers, all they do is just track a position. So just making a world around where is that is going to give you a lot more scope control than trying to take on the full controller of the Quest. One of the things to think about is I highly encourage not to get into the complexity of buttons and controllers and things like that. Stick with something as simple as you can and build an activity around that. In some sense, we're not going to say no to too much, but the warning here is 1 week of scope isn't just, can you make something in a week? It's, can you iterate it and make it good? So the simplicity of your controls will be critical to this working well. And the eye tracker is a very simple two-dimensional thing. Where are your eyes on the screen? So that's what all of these are sort of designed around, is trying to keep you in a sort of simpler tracking space. Icarus is the flying chair thing. And what I recommend is that you meet with the TAs and talk about the platforms before you commit. So we'll talk about that right now, about access.
All right, we'll go this really, really quick. First of all, again, please name your APKs, change your company name and team number. Two, the next week, all second years have half presentations, which means that the RPIS is going to be very, very busy over this week and next week. So please plan accordingly. You will still be able to test on Monday evenings down here, but for the rest of it, you're probably not going to be able to. Third, be considerate. Continue to be mindful of different cultural backgrounds, different work styles and languages. Try to be accommodating, try to work with your teams on all of those things. Plan for your sound and art assets early, even more this round since you only have 1 week. You do not want to be that one opera team with no sound assets in your game. Finally, the deadline is final. Next, check-in stuff. Hopefully you all got my email this afternoon. Lachlan will be upstairs in the BVW equipment room from 3:30 to 5 to check in all of your props and hardware from this past round. Make sure you include a video in your submission folder. Really, really manage your scope. Dave mentioned that, but you only have 1 week, so make something small and then add to it. Don't shoot really, really big. And then finally, push through. It's almost fall break. You can make it. You guys are strong. The workshop schedule for this week. First of all, team retrospectives will be this evening, just like they were last week. There will be a producers roundtable on Thursday this week that Shan will be running. Since it's only 1 week, it's going to be on Thursday, and there won't be one next week. There will be an intro to platforms programming-ish workshop. Other people are welcome, and that'll be. Can I talk about that? Oh, sure.
Yeah. So with that, tomorrow, essentially at 5:30, we're going to be going over all of the various platforms that you can choose from. But every sort of TA has somewhat of a specialization as well. With the eye trackers, there will actually be a like PDF sort of document tutorial type of thing that you can follow, and you can also reach out to Rick for more information on that. With the Vive trackers and the Ecto boots, those will all be up in the hardware room, and we will be running through how those work. So yeah, try to send like a representative from your team if you're interested in doing that, for sure.
Cool. Art workshops for this week. We have a 3D art pipeline with ZBrush to Unity. That's going to be a tutorial. And we'll also have creating materials with Substance Designer, and that'll be on Thursday from 6 to 7. For sound workshops, we have a remote sound feedback session, just like the last couple of weeks. And we'll also have a recording techniques and voiceover workshop on Thursday for all of you who are interested in that. Cool. Fairs.
Cool. Okay, so with the Quest, we were doing a lot of different stuff. We were like wirelessly transmitting basically 2 streams of like screen captured stuff. We were doing hand tracking. We were doing like running our own little like sort of development apps, in addition to basically it being a VR headset needing to run at a high frame rate. So naturally, there were some performance issues. All of those variables were controlled for when we were testing last night. The main difference that I can identify is that it was doing all of that stuff, including pass-through, in a room full of people where things are moving around and stuff was changing. So I absolutely apologize for like all of the jittery alignment issues that we were having. We cycled through so many quests today, and we were just not able to solve it. But I mean, that's just part of the learning process. I will say this again. I'm sorry if I haven't communicated this strongly enough, but if you're developing for Quest and doing an AR app, make sure you have a start state for your calibration, because doing the calibration outside of your app and then launching into your app isn't always necessarily going to work. So try to have your app start in a state that we can calibrate it in. One other thing I would like to say is if you're interested in doing Quest 2 in round 3, we are experimenting with mixed reality capture, which is essentially this new way of recording your worlds, so that it kind of is like a camera is looking at the person in VR from outside of their app. And so we will probably be potentially abducting some of your teams to help with that for brief periods of time. So if that is something that you're also interested in looking into, you can talk to us about it. And it's just a better way of documenting your worlds for your portfolios.
Yeah, one of our goals is when we get to festival, we'll have recordings of your worlds. And the goal, if we can get it, is to film it in such a way that we can have a picture of the guest and they are in the virtual space. So they're mixed in with the virtual, so the live action is green screened in and stuff like that. And that's what we're experimenting with. So there might be some opportunities to play with that in round 3. It's not a requirement, but the TAs are working on other things behind the scenes that are coming, and that's one of them. Good? Anything else? One note, Thursday, we're going to be outside. So come prepared to be outside in the field next door. I think the weather's going to be nice, and so we're going to be doing something fun and outside. It should be a fun activity. With that, congratulations. Great work, everyone.